Welcome back to Project Geekology, episode 94? 94. And of course, my cat wants to say something important. Guys, we are here to talk to you about not X-Men 94, but X-Men 97. Yes, it is I think it's the 6th official season in the X-Men animated series that began in the 90s. I think it began in 92 or 93. And they just kept, I guess they brought it back for a 6th and potentially final season, but no, it's getting another season after this. Anthony, this is your first time actually watching X-Men 97 season 1, as it's been brought back from Disney Plus. Without getting too bogged down in spoilers, like, what are your first thoughts?
So before I answer that, yes, this episode is going to be spoilery. So if you have not seen it, I would recommend not listening to this episode unless you want to use it to kind of like figure out if you like it. But dude, I mean, wouldn't you recommend like to watch it before listening to this?
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, it is hands. Well, here's the thing. Do you think that people need to watch 5 seasons of a show from the 90s to watch this 10-episode series from 2024?
I feel like it could help with a lot. Like I think that there are some references
totally
that like it could help out a lot, but I don't think that you need to watch them to enjoy it. It's just good X-Men.
Right.
It's got its, own story that, I mean, quite frankly, man, it was phenomenal. I thought it was like absolutely phenomenal. You can tell that this show was made for those that were fans of the past one. Like you can tell, like, because I felt like it grew up with the audience. It felt very mature,
100%. And so I'm in 100% agreement. I think we talked about this briefly when it was coming out, the original show. I think it was like episode 3 and then episode 5 blew me away, and I was gushing about it in the episodes, whatever respective episodes we were talking about at the time.
Yeah.
But it's been a couple months at this point since it's been released, and we've now gone through 14 episodes worth of podcasts talking about all of the Fox movies going up until Deadpool and Wolverine, which isn't really a Fox movie, but it's kind of the culmination of that Fox era. And we decided to go one podcast further and discuss the X-Men films, the X-Men TV series that Marvel adopted, which was the original X-Men animated series, which they adopted and, turned it into X-Men 97, which is kind of like a year after the show ended, basically.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to say about what ultimately is a phenomenal show. But, Anthony, what have you been up to this past week?
Well, I've been diving deep into X-Men 97, been enjoying it all, been enjoying all the 10 episodes, and I feel like there was never like any like weak episode, so I enjoyed.
No, even so I would probably say the weakest. We'll talk more about it later probably, but it was probably the 2-part or like the half-part episode where it was like the Mojo World Nintendo game and the beginning of the Storm arc, like that right, like, I think it was episode 4. Yeah, it was episode 4. A good episode in, all together, but like compared to the rest of the series, it was just like probably the weaker link.
Right. But yeah, so that's what I've been up to. I mean, I've also been playing Star Wars Outlaws.
Me too.
To pretty much like prepare for our upcoming episode. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna have it beat by then, but I'll have enough to like really have a concise thing to like talk about. And I think that like this is the type of thing, the type of game that we can talk a lot about, like the aspects and different stuff. Instead of having to dive too deep into the story of it, which I mean we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I know that I know that like, well, I guess we'll leave the impression so far until next week, because then like you'll probably have a little bit more under your belt, and like maybe
Right.
things change. But there's that. Oh, something else. So I took a little bit of a break from Star Wars Outlaws to mess around with that Quidditch game.
Oh, I saw a little bit about that online. I just assumed it was meant to be like the Quidditch game from when we were kids.
No, so it's not like it's not a remake of that. It's not the Quidditch World Cup. This one, you actually get to like create your own team pretty much.
Okay.
Like what they look like, the keeper, the beaters, the chasers. Yes.
Chasers.
Yes. And yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. I'm interested in like playing a little bit more of that, but I'm trying to not like stray too much into that. I just kind of wanted to check it out because I got to play. I mean, it's on PlayStation Plus, so I was like, dude, let me hop on, let me try this.
Is it any good?
So yeah, I'm having fun. It's not like I wouldn't call it. It's a little bit different. Like I guess coming to it as an adult, but like the Quidditch World Cup was it was what it was. Like it was you just picked a team and you played it. This one's a little bit more in depth. So well, not in depth, but like you get to create your own team and
Sure,
and
yeah.
whatnot. But I mean, I enjoy it. I think it's pretty fun. I think it's worth checking out. I mean, especially if you're a huge Harry Potter fan. I've also been doing a Harry Potter marathon with some friends. So, dude, like I'm Harry Pottered out, man.
So, what do you mean? Like you've been watching the movies? You've been reading the books?
The movies. Yeah.
Okay. Where are you now in the movies?
We are at the fourth movie.
Like you're about to start the fourth movie?
Well, yeah, we're gonna start that.
Nice.
So
That's a good time. And those first three movies are so good. We've talked in depth about them on the show here. Have we done a Goblet of Fire episode? I don't think we have.
Dude, we actually have to like remember we had that the third movie episode got like just.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm sorry.
That was the one where like things messed up on your end and my end at the same time. It was like the worst.
Listeners, occasionally technical issues occur to the point where episodes just don't get recorded the way that they are presumed to have been recorded. And this was one of those episodes.
We had that happen twice.
That happened twice. Once when we first started the the podcast, like way back when. I think it was the episode that we did on the original like DC Universe announcement or something like that.
Yes.
I forget what DC Fanverse. I forget what it was even called at this point.
Fandom,
yes. We had to re-record that episode, so if we sound really bored in that episode, it's because we've already talked about everything. Prisoner of Azkaban is one of those episodes that we recorded fully. And
Yeah.
it didn't exist after we recorded it. It was just in the ether. Like we just wasted an hour talking to you guys for nothing. It was a good time.
Right,
it was a
right.
good conversation.
It was. I mean, we'll eventually get that one out. I think we just have to like let enough time pass by to like justify being able to talk about it again.
I think we were both so burned out after that we just haven't touched. I think it's been over a year since we talked about Potter.
It's been a while. It really has.
Maybe we'll get into that after we talk about Outlaws next week. You never
Yeah, we can take another crack at that,
another crack.
I think at this
Prisoner of
point,
Azkaban.
like if your computer starts shutting down or my thing start, I'd be like, okay, let's.
This is at this point it's divine intervention. Like we can't talk about Harry Potter on this.
No more
podcast
Harry
anymore.
Potter, yeah.
No,
but yeah,
good,
but yeah,
cool.
I mean, other than that, like it hasn't been too much crazy things. How about you? What have you been up to?
Not a well. I've been really busy in terms of the past couple episodes. I've been talking about like trying to read all of the Avatar comics. I have officially finished all of them, including all of the Avatar Korra stuff. It took a very long time. I think it's probably like close to like 2,600 pages of comics altogether. It was a good amount. Yeah, no, it was a good amount. And I took notes on everything, so it took a little extra long, you know. But I'm very happy about it. I gotta admit, like, there was no single comic run that I felt wasn't worth reading. Like, in terms of, like, the big graphic novel stuff that you know, they released with those, like, Last Airbender and Legend of Korra books. Both of those series, the respective series, The Legend of Korra and Last Airbender, they extended the story past the original cartoon. So with the Last Airbender, you had 6 graphic novel trilogies that talked about different events, and it's almost like half a season's worth of events in each of those graphic novel trilogies. So really, it's almost like 3 seasons worth of television in those graphic novels, and it's really, really good. Like all 6 of those graphic novel trilogies, like, I would say, is like 1/2 of a season. So it's about 3 seasons worth of Avatar: The Last Airbender content, and it's phenomenal. It's really strong stuff. The Legend of Korra, the first graphic novel trilogy, Turf Wars, did not grab me all that much at the beginning, but it turned out really, like, fascinating near the tail end of it. And then the second graphic novel trilogy, called Ruins of the Empire, kind of takes the threads of how Legend of Korra ended. I don't know if you've watched Legend of Korra, Anthony.
I have. I was just thinking that, like, we need to cover that at some point.
I would love to cover Legend of Korra. Legend of Korra is a fantastic series. I think people are too hard on it, and I think it's one of those shows that deserves a second watch, because a lot of the issues that you may have had the first time through that may have inspired anger or, like, disinterest, on a second watch you might not feel that same way. And that's
no, like, I mean, it won't have the same impact as the original series, but it takes a lot of it, a lot of the original series, and kind of evolves a lot of things. Like, you know, the civilization doesn't,
right.
It's not like, you know, people are living in, you know, villages and like, you know, these, you know, cities that look, you know, kind of archaic in a way. They're like, you know, so there's cars and whatnot now, and, you know, bending has evolved. You know, there's like the metal bending and lava bending and all that stuff. So, and honestly, man, like, they still maintain the beauty of, like, the animation. The way that bending is used still looks amazing.
It looks, honestly, if you're being, like, honest with yourself, it looks better. You know, like, the martial arts aspect of the show looks way better in Legend of Korra. They just knocked it out of the park. So Ruins of the Empire is the second graphic novel trilogy that they created that takes place after The Legend of Korra. And it basically takes place like 3 months after The Legend of Korra. So, like, Kuvira, the woman who was basically trying to take over, like, the Earth Kingdom and like start an Earth Empire by the 4th season. It basically kind of gives her a bit of a redemption arc in terms of, like, trying to get things back on track for the nation. And it's a fascinating read. Like, I was, like, blown away by it. And it's these 2 specifically, Turf Wars and Ruins of the Empire, the 2 graphic novel trilogies, are written by Michael Dante DiMartino, which is one of the actual, like, creators of the original Last Airbender show. So, like, what I'll say about those Legend of Korra books versus the Avatar books is that those 2 Korra books are written by, you know, one of the original creators of the Avatar series. The other books are fantastic, absolutely, like, top tier fan content, basically. Like, you know, like, someone else wrote them, and then Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko signed off on it. You know, like, the Legend of Korra stuff that came after that show is, like, fully written by the original team. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's nice. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
I did play a little bit of Outlaws, not enough to really get a good picture of it. I probably altogether played like 5 to 7 hours worth of gameplay, and I think I'm doing more of the side quests currently than the main story.
It's so easy to get caught up in side quests.
It is amazingly easy to get caught up in side quests because it's so easy to like not realize you're not doing the main storyline when all these other storylines seem just as important but clearly aren't.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like a good bit going on. I feel like, and we'll get more in depth in it when we actually cover it, but I feel like it's getting a little bit more flack than it should. It's not a perfect game, but there's still a lot. It still feels very much so like a Star Wars game.
And it's 100% Star Wars. But I think for me, my current issue is a lack of story. And I think that is partially because of the game. You know, like you have RPGs that will try to push you to like follow the storyline to a point. In this game, it starts you off. There's not really much of a tutorial phase of the game at all. And then,
I mean, there is a little bit of a tutorial phase. I mean, like, you know, the one that I'll say that like it kind of stumped me at first and I had to look it up was the data spiking.
Sure. Yeah. No, I actually agree. Like the data spiking was a little bit difficult, as well as you basically have to play Wordle to like slice into panels. Basically, it's the same basic principle as Wordle. You know, like you have to...
Oh, dude, I was so confused with that. I was like, what am I like? What do I select? Like, do I just like select whatever? Like,
I was like drinking at the time when I first got that, and I was just like clicking random buttons, and I was just like, it worked! Wow, I did it! And then like the next day,
that's what happened to me. I was just like, I'm like, wait, what do I do? Like,
it doesn't tell you.
I was looking for a pattern, like, you know, I'm just like, what?
It doesn't tell you.
And then like the matching up the beeping of the data spiking.
You know, like I don't think we've, to give the game credit, you know, like, you know, we're talking about the game a week earlier than we planned to, but to give the game credit, like that's a new thing that I don't think I've ever experienced in a game where like it wanted me to like sync up with noises.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Same. Yeah. But yeah, no, we'll definitely talk more about like that and then the details and, you know, things that we like and the gripes and whatnot. But, you know, I don't know, like, have you been out? We're 20 minutes in. I don't know. Did you have anything else that you had going on that you wanted to let everybody know?
Let's talk about X-Men 97. How about that?
Are you sure it's a 97, not 96 or 98, 99?
Here's what you're probably getting confused by. It's Project Geekology 94, but we're covering X-Men 97.
X-Men 97, dude. I thought we were covering X-Men Evolution.
Oh, no, that's a different episode. We haven't even discussed that on the on the show before.
But yeah, X-Men 97, man. Bro, what a show. I mean, it was a wild ride. Like, I mean, it is a wild ride of a cartoon. So how much have you watched of this prior to doing the show? Watching it for the podcast. I had watched the first 2 episodes, so like I knew that they were like good, but like I had stopped and I was like, I feel like I wanted to go back and watch the old one.
It does inspire you. It does inspire you to like at least try to like go back and rewatch everything. Right. So that's pretty much what I did, and then I never got back onto X-Men 97, not because like I didn't want to, but you know, you get caught up and then there's other things to like watch. But dude, like this one was crazy. Like I don't think I've ever seen like an animated series like the, you know, animated, not anime, but animated series that was like, that had me like, oh my gosh, like with like the level of maturity that it had. Like, I mean, to me it didn't feel like it was a show for kids. I mean, sure, kids could have watched it, but it definitely was, you know, the way that they spoke, like it was just like they used words that I'd be like, dude, I know that 10-year-old me would not understand what this man is saying right now. Yeah. Totally. So yeah, it's just, man, I had to look up. I had watching this again. I had to look up what jingoism meant. There was a bunch of words, honestly, that they were just like, you know, that's way above my pay grade in terms of like what I you know do here as a podcaster. But right, you know, I'm amazed that this show exists, because when this was first announced, everyone was excited. You know, it's a beloved show. It's one of the best superhero animated series, period. Like when people go and talk about like the shows they grew up with in terms of like superhero stuff, it's always X-Men animated series, maybe Spider-Man,
Batman, the Brave and the Bold,
Batman, the 90s Batman series, that was a fantastic series too.
Yeah. Superman,
yeah. But this is one of those
X-Men
classic
97,
ones.
yeah.
This was a classic one, especially for like the kids who grew up on like WB, you know.
On man.
Like Saturday morning cartoons.
Dude, Saturday morning cartoons, man. Jackie Chan Adventures, one of my faves.
You know what's crazy, dude? Like, we grew up in the tail end of Saturday morning cartoons. Like, that only existed for a short period of time in our youth. And then
I remember them. I mean, we lived like a good bit of. I feel like we aged well enough into it. Like, it wasn't that like it ended when I was 5. Like, I think I was like 10 and 11, and they were still doing Saturday morning cartoons. But things shifted. I was getting a little bit more into anime, and was catching the Toonami in the afternoons. And
okay, yeah. So I'm looking it up now. According to Yahoo.com, the final Saturday morning cartoon was on September 27th, 2014. So that's well into like our adulthood at that point. You know, that was 10 years ago. So it was we were all of 22 at the time.
Right. But by then, like we weren't
really watching cartoons at that point. But I think the heyday of Saturday morning cartoons was way before that. You know, like 80s and 90s. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
When I think of Saturday
90s,
morning,
early 2000s.
Sure. When I think of Saturday morning cartoons, I think of like Pokemon. I think of, like you said, Jackie Chan Adventures. I think of
Dragon Ball Z. Well, like they had it on there too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the WB shows that transitioned to the CW. X-Men 97, or not X-Men 97, but X-Men, the animated series, was one of those shows that they aired on those. Those channels.
I remember watching some of it on there too. That was crazy. Yeah, I remember catching that. I remember those days where like the CW was WB, and like there was a small period of time where like was it Smallville was on the WB before it became CW. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. The original X-Men, the X-Men series, I remember catching it on WB.
Yeah, and then you also had the X-Men Evolution and all that. But
I honestly, like, I know a lot of people gave that one flack, but I loved it for its own reason.
I think it was just a matter of like a different generation, experiencing a new iteration of a character cast, I guess. But whoever came up with the idea of a goth girl rogue was a genius. Like. Fantastic. Just perfect.
Yeah, it worked well, yeah. But yeah,
let's talk about X-Men 97. You watched the first 2 episodes back when it was first airing, a couple months back, and you felt that instead of continuing with this series, let's go back and rewatch a couple episodes. How do you feel that the quality from the original series to what this new series had differs?
Well, I feel like the original series, it has a lot more campiness to it.
Sure.
And it feels very much so like a 1990s cartoon. But, I still enjoyed it. I thought that, it was fun to watch. And it's almost like, going back to like watch like Pokemon, like, the Indigo League. It felt like doing that, like going back, it felt like I felt like a kid, catching those Saturday morning cartoons. The quality, though, was extremely upscaled from like back then up to now. They used the same style animation, but it was a lot more crisp, and the show matured. It was like it was like a 30-year-old. It's like a 30-year-old.
What's funny is that like. One of the big changes in like the early episodes of this show was that Scott and Jean we're having a baby.
Right, right.
In the original series, I don't think that would have been a plot line, you know, especially not as convoluted and as mature of a plot line as we received with the Cable and, you know, that whole plot line with Madeline Pryor and all that. I don't think that would have existed in the original show. And I think that's part of what kind of makes this special, is that, like, it takes the characters that we have from the original series, takes all of their, like, starting points from the end of that last series, including, like, Charles Xavier back, like, up in the Shi'ar Empire and all that, and just kind of evolves it with the times while staying, like, somewhat chronologically centered in the 90s, but I guess evolving with the audience in terms of, like, what they expect to see from the series as adults now that they're watching it from a different vantage point. And these are adults that have experienced, you know, terrible things in their lifetime. You know, like, we've gone through 9/11. We've gone through dozens and dozens of, like, school shootings and all this. And you kind of take that trauma that we've...
Right, COVID, you know.
COVID, anything that we've normalized, you know, over the course of the 20, 30 years since the original show aired. And you kind of, like, push that onto the narrative of the series, and you create a storyline that is just, it works seamlessly with the X-Men storyline. I don't know how they did it, but man, it's an insane feat that they were capable of doing this to, like, a Saturday morning kids cartoon, basically.
Yeah, no, it was, it's just like they just kept you on your toes, like, pretty much the entire series, you know, like, you couldn't really guess what was gonna happen.
No, and I think that's to its benefit as well as its whatever the opposite of benefit is. I I think that, like, what is the opposite of benefit? Like a non-benefit? I don't know.
A drawback.
Sure, a drawback. What I mean to say is that I feel like sometimes it became so convoluted plot-wise that you almost needed to, like, watch the like last time on X-Men before every episode.
I did it every time.
Because, like, a lot happens. A lot happens every episode.
And then they kind of condense it a little bit, like, to, like, give you, like, the main story beats in those, like, you know, the replays. But yeah, no, I absolutely, like, watch it, especially, like, because I didn't watch it all in one day. I watched it over a couple of days. So then, like, I would start, you know, the next day I would go in watching episodes. I would watch that replay to kind of refresh myself on what it was that happened. But yeah, no, it things got crazy. I mean, especially with the whole Jean Grey and, you know, Goblin Queen thing, man.
Yeah, so I think episode 3
Dude, that was crazy. I'm like you just see, like, Jean stumbling in, and I'm like, huh? Yeah. Then I was like, but then I was like, oh, when you saw the Jean, I was like, oh man, because, like, I knew about the Goblin Queen, and that she was, like, that she's a clone of Jean. So I was like, oh wait, is that Madeline Pryor? Or I didn't think that at first. I was thinking, oh, is that Goblin Queen? And it ended up being Goblin Queen. I was like, dude, this is crazy.
Yeah. And
then, like, knowing and then kind of figuring out, like, who one of the main villains of, like, this story arc is, and it's like, it's not Magneto. Magneto has that, you know, that he's a complicated season.
Yeah,
very complicated.
But he's not the villain. Like, nobody,
right.
Even by the end, you know, like, there's a lot of conflict with Magneto near the end of the season, but, like, he's not the villain. You know, like, there's several other villains, like, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. I mean, we're kind of dancing around that, like, we're not talking about a spoiler episode, but
yeah, no, this is a full spoiler thing at this point. It's if you guys have not watched X-Men 97, I recommend it. I don't recommend trying to sit through 5 seasons of an animated series to get to this point. There's enough callback in the last time on X-Men and throughout the, like, dialogue of the show to, like, piece your way through what's happening in real time. And if you have a basic knowledge of the X-Men team, which I'm assuming you have if you've listened to the past 14 episodes of Project Geekology, where we've talked about a number of X-Men episodes, you can follow the story pretty easily. You know, like, you will experience some things where you have to, you know, like, really focus your attention on. Like, you can't watch this season passively and expect to get a lot out of it, especially not the second half of it. You know, there's a lot that happens in the second half of the season that, like, you need to, like, actively be paying attention to.
Right. And see, that shows like that sometimes are tough, you know?
Yes.
Because, I mean, a lot of people get distracted and whatnot. So this is not something that you can watch while you're, like, kind of walking around, like, cleaning around the room. You actually have to, like, sit down because there is a lot that goes on. And
right, we don't want you playing Clash of Clans on your phone while you're watching TV. This is something you need to, like,
on Instagram.
Don't try
no
to
TikTok scrolling.
Don't try to piece out the latest Star Wars drama on Twitter. Just watch the show. Yeah, no, it's a fantastic series. But yeah,
and it deserves the attention. It really does.
100%. Yeah, they did a fantastic job. They brought back most of the original cast. That alone shows you that they were trying to do right by the original series.
Right. Which that alone you can appreciate. And, you know, let's talk about some of the. Well, I mean, we could talk about, like, some of the X-Men, like, that we come into. Like, you have Jubilee, Gambit, Rogue, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, Wolverine, Morph.
What I find is a really interesting choice that this series takes on is that, going back to the original series, the original X-Men series, Jubilee was the introductory character. You know, like, Storm and Jean Grey and Cyclops and Beast, they've all been on the X-Men team, along with Wolverine and Professor X and all that. Those characters have all existed for a while past the original point of the animated series. But Jubilee was the character that they were rescuing. You know, she was the new character that they were showing around and trying to, like, prove that this family was worth joining.
Right. And she calls back to that.
Yeah, she definitely does. And in this series, it's not Jubilee, it's Roberto da Costa, which, you know, he eventually becomes Sunspot. And he has a very interesting story because he is from a family who doesn't believe in, I guess, being true to oneself in terms of, like, the mutation aspect of, you know, being a mutant. Obviously, like, his family is a very wealthy Brazilian family who owns some company or other, and their shareholders would be very negatively impacted if they found out that the Costa line produced a mutant like Sunspot.
Right, yeah. And, like, at first it seemed like the mother was a little bit accepting, and then she hits him with a line like, you know, maybe you want to keep this low key.
Yes, not low key like Loki, but Lowkey.
Yeah.
And
because like I mean, for the reasons that you just explained, that, you know, that they don't want to realize that the shareholders, they don't want their shareholders to know that there's a mutant in the family. Yeah. And so, but yeah, I did notice that like that it parallel, was cool that Jubilee was the one that, like, that showed him around. Because she was that person.
She was basically, like, shepherding him as the new person, you know?
Yes.
To the team. And I really liked that. I thought it was a really good balance of, you know, like, you're giving Jubilee, who's not a seasoned veteran, like a warrior or a veteran at this point, her abilities aren't extremely useful for battle as of yet. You know, she can create fireworks, basically.
Yeah.
But
are you going to slay me with the 4th of July?
Yeah, I love that. Oh, Bastion, I love you. But I love that she was able to show Roberto around and, you know, kind of, like, give him the ins and outs of being an X-Men. That's something that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. The beginning of the season, you know, like, early in the season, it hit you with, like its first haymaker. There's a will and testament that Professor Xavier leaves, and he leaves the leadership of the X-Men to Magneto. And you're like, dude, what?
And you think about it for a second, though. Like, at first, it sounds absolutely insane because these characters, Magneto and Professor Xavier, have been enemies for decades in the comics. Frenemies, yes. They're like, we'll get along for this time, but then in our next comic book arc or our next season, we'll be full on enemies, and blah blah blah. But like, it makes sense, that Charles Xavier would consider his oldest friend capable of taking on where he left off with the X-Men. And
right. And honestly, for the most part, I will applaud Magneto, like, trying his hardest. Like, he really tried to like honor Charles.
100%. He did everything. He basically like went in front of a tribunal that was trying to like arrest him.
Yeah.
He lived through a literal genocide, like on Genosha. Like he went through everything possible in the name of Charles Xavier's future.
Right. And
it wasn't a genocide. It was a terrorist attack. But yeah, you know what I mean.
I mean, but that was the intention, though.
Sure.
Really.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that was, like, I was surprised. Like, he was really trying. Like, he wanted to honor, his friend. Like, even though their ideologies were different, he was like, he started to see a little bit like, maybe this can happen, but let me honor him. And there's a line that Professor Xavier says. It's pretty much him agreeing with the reason why Magneto is doing what he's doing. He goes through all the stuff. Magneto kind of reverts back to like, okay, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm about to just throw down on these people again. But he's like, Professor Xavier says like, he's doing this because of all of his worst fears are coming true, and that you guys are doing this.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's right. Honestly, to say the truth, I don't blame Magneto for being as angry as he got, because he tried everything, and no matter what, they kept on getting attacked. And like, episode 5 was literally the red wedding of this show.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about other things before we talk about episode 5, because I truly want to talk about episode 5 and I don't want to get sidetracked. But like, taking it back a little bit, we have Storm, who during the tribunal where the United Nations is trying to like pin down Magneto for all of his crimes against humanity, someone breaks in, tries to, do like a January 6th sort of thing, and, like insurrect the proceedings, and they tried to take Magneto's powers away from him.
Right. Well, there was like this whole like kind of mob outside, like protesters.
Right. Yes.
And yeah, they were kind of like forcing their way in, but there was, this one that had like pretty much weapons to take away mutant powers. And yeah, they were aiming right for Magneto, but Storm took that bullet, and she noticed like instantly, like, I can't feel, the air, the pretty much like everything, like what she's used to feeling. Yeah,
and it's almost, I can't imagine it. It's like, if you're so used to feeling this sixth sense, imagine what it would be like if you lost your sight or lost your hearing, like right. It would be that, So what Storm goes through this season is really, as a really powerful storyline, as a subplot that goes through the story, because she loses her powers she loses her powers for months.
Yeah. And like, she steps away from the X-Men for a little bit, because
what is she going to do?
Yeah, what is she going to do? And then she meets up with Forge, which he helps her out. But she has like this like whole... There's a whole just owl beast thing that was like absolutely insane. Like it was like a fever dream that she was experiencing, but it was like real.
So it almost seemed very similar to in New Mutants, which we covered a couple of weeks ago. Maybe you should go check out our discussion of New Mutants. It's basically a very similar concept to the Demon Bear. That one of the characters in New Mutants kind of dreams up and makes into reality. I think part of Storm's plight when dealing with the loss of her powers is this just absence, this white lie that she cannot be what she was meant to be, or that she'll never return to what she is. And I think that is the adversary. Like that's what they called this like demon owl thing in this episode, or these two episodes that it appeared in. The adversary was basically this almost like just pure negative energy. Like everything that she could have wished for herself, it was wishing the opposite for her. Like it wasn't campaigning for her to overcome anything. It was it was trying to get her to succumb to her own doubts. So it was almost like she was battling her demons. Like it was just her personal doubts manifested in this like potentially literal demon. I don't even know. We don't really know what the adversary is.
I think it was real because it bit onto Forge and he had some.
Yes. He
had some like like infection going on, and so like I thought that like it was like what you said, like an inner thing, but then like since that was real, and the fact that like that interaction between the adversary and Forge, like that he had a very real wound, so it's like, okay, well then that had to be real.
But so Storm's whole arc I think was fantastic, and the fact that she eventually overcame that and found her powers again while battling the adversary. Like this was after Forge tried to fix her, and maybe did fix her, but like her mental faculties weren't in the proper order to allow her to like believe that she was fixed. And I think it was like that confined space that she was in, where she was trying to help someone else, that allowed her to become Storm again. And I just love that like everyone in the series calls her a goddess. Like she's literally like an Omega level threat, like in terms of units. She's literally a goddess on Earth, like
So we had talked a little bit about there was that one episode that you said that if there was a weak one, it was going to be that one, the Motendo one.
Motendo,
The thing I liked about that episode was that it was almost like a callback to cartoons like back in the day. Remember when cartoons used to be split into like 2 mini episodes?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. I was like, oh my gosh, like I said, did this guy 2 episodes?
Also, they brought back Mojo. They brought back Mojo from the original series, and while most people don't like Mojo, myself included, I think it was cool that they brought him back for like another go. Because what's not to love?
Mojo kind of reminds me of that one guy from Teen Titans that would trap them into the TV world.
Oh, I forgot
his name though. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Like there's a villain in Teen Titans that like literally like traps them into like TV land, like the TV dimension. And so Mojo kind of reminds me of that. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was a cool like little episode. I didn't have like any. I didn't have any negatives about it. It was just like of everything, it was like kind of just a little bit weaker. Yeah, it was like a breather. That like part of the episode was like a breather because like you just got smacked,
Yeah. So episode 3 was extremely heavy. Where like you realize that the Jean Grey that you've been watching over the past couple episodes isn't the real Jean Grey. And the son that she just gave birth to is basically like a clone that was produced by Dr. Sinister to do something, but we don't know at this point. Like sorry, I just hit the mic. We don't know why, Dr. Sinister wanted Scott Summers and Jean Grey's child clone thing So it was just a crazy episode.
Yeah, they had to send him Nathan
Into the future, basically, because
aka Cable into the future because with Bishop, because Bishop is, he's from the future and he knew somebody that could help save Cable. And it was like a very just Madeline Pryor, she, after like the realization that that she was a clone, she has like that like a bit of a villainous moment,
yeah,
and she kind of like snaps out of that. And there we got Jean Grey and Madeline kind of existing, and Madeline being the one that had the child with Cyclops. And it was just so like back and forth. I felt so bad for Jean Grey. She's like, I don't know, did I really get married to Scott, or was that Madeline that got married? Like just not knowing whose memories were who.
Yeah, imagine that. Like, where do you start and where does Madeline Pryor begin? Yeah, like...
exactly. Yeah, and yeah, like that was, it was like the beginning of the season. Like it was heavy right off the bat, and it just does not take its foot off for the entire season, dude.
Yeah, I guess the Motendo episode was the slight release off of the gas, before getting right back on the gas, full steam. So let's talk about episode 5. I talked about it briefly on Twitter. I just mentioned that I believe that episode 5 of X-Men 97, called Remember It, is one of the rare perfect episodes of television.
Oh yeah, I think I had seen you posted that.
I 100% believe it's true. Like, I think it's just one of those, like everything in the episode leads you to a certain feeling, and then all of a sudden it shakes you. Like it changes something dynamically to a degree that like you just, how did they accomplish that? Like, and I'm sure you experienced that. So this is the first
dropping. Yeah, like
this is the first time you've experienced it. So what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is that for a good bit of the episode, it builds you up with the sense of hope, right?
Yeah.
And then hits you like just as hard with like the feeling of dread and loss.
So let's talk about that hope really quick, because like a big part of the series is Magneto kind of giving in to Charles Xavier's future. Like he kind of adopts Charles he kind of adopts Charles' ideals for a little bit as Genosha becomes a United Nations nation, basically.
Right. It's a mutant nation, and it's like they're working on it becoming a part of the United Nations. They get there. And it's not all of the X-Men. Like Magneto's there, Rogue is there, Gambit is there, and then we meet up with Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler's there.
Yeah.
It was really cool I was like, oh man, there goes my boy. And like there's just like this whole civilization has been built up. It looks, like everybody's united. It looks great. Nobody's being persecuted in the streets because they're all mutants. And yeah, man, like that hope gets knocked down real quick.
Yeah. So a Master Mold Sentinel creation comes out of nowhere. Well, what's perfect about this is that like you get the premonition beforehand a little bit, like shortly, a couple minutes before everything goes to crap. Cable shows up and basically shows up to Madeline Pryor and is like, "I'm sorry, I'm late, Mom," or something along those lines, and then it all clicks. Like, Cable is the son that Madeline Pryor and Scott Summers sent into the future, and he's trying to save them from something. And then all of a sudden stuff starts blowing up, and a Master Mold shows up to, this exquisite ballroom where, all these mutants are dancing and stuff. And it's supposed to be the height of mutant civilization, and it just blows it to bits.
Yeah, man. that master mold was insane. Like, you know, even Gambit, I think Gambit called it like Godzilla master mold or Godzilla Sentinel. Like
Yeah.
that's what it was like. Like it was like the worst that they had ever come across. And like, I mean, dude, like mutant after mutant was being like killed, man. And
I think they said that like 4,000 people died. If I remember correctly, like 4,000 mutants and or humans died in the attack that the terrorist attack, which is an insane amount of people.
yeah, you know, but we get a couple of surprises from that. You know, Gambit dies in this.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic way to go because throughout the earlier episodes of the series, you're starting to realize that Gambit is the third wheel in a relationship between Rogue and Magneto, and that's a whole situation that like he has to come to grips with, and he comes to grips with it on his own before Rogue even like mentions it to him. Like he kind of sees the signs and says like, I'd rather step aside, basically.
Right, he sees the writing on the wall, and you know, I mean, they've always kind of had a tumultuous relationship. Yeah, I mean, because I mean, we know Rogue can't really like touch anybody, but like Magneto is able to kind of create a magnetic field that protects him from it.
Yeah, which is a really interesting new concept between Rogue and Magneto, which allows her the ability to touch him, which is something that she desperately craves as someone who can't physically touch another human. So Magneto is offering Rogue something that Gambit cannot offer,
Without like getting killed, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. So when Gambit finally, tries to attack the Master Mold and gets impaled, all hope seems lost. And then you realize, like, oh, Gambit's still in control of his abilities. And his abilities are whatever he touches, he can explode. Like that is a ability that he has, and he uses it to incredible effect. One of the best lines in the show that pretty much everyone who watched this remembers is, "The name's Gambit, mon ami. Remember it." And then he basically, just disintegrates the Master Mold because that's
with his power, like he envelops it with his power and blows it up. Yeah, that was really, really sick. For a little bit there, we think that Magneto got killed too.
Yes, it took a couple episodes until the final 3 episodes that, like where Bastion's trying to explain like, like he's got something up his sleeve as well. But in that moment, one of the best lines of the show is this line from Rogue, who's like holding the dead corpse of Gambit, and she's saying, "I can't feel you. I can't feel you." And she's like she's crying as she's saying it, and it's the agony of the actress, like giving it her all in this moment, because like even though like she was never able to feel Gambit, like now she literally cannot feel Gambit, like it's not touches and everything, but now he's no longer even there. It's a really powerful episode. It's probably the single best X-Men anything that's ever been produced is episode 5 of this show, I think, personally.
Yeah, it was good. And you can kind of you can kind of see, what was it, Magneto calls back to it, and he definitely, Magneto in this show has a lot more than just villain. Like he's not a villain in this one. He's somebody that he tried to do right, and he just got struck down at every point. And he was even talking about like, he was hurt about the fact that like he told somebody to not be afraid, and they got incinerated right in front of him.
Oh, and that was such a powerful moment too. Like I like that moment is like he even like speaks to him in German. Like I forget what he says or whatever, but like it's just whatever he says, it's more powerful because of the moment that he shares with that mutant. Like the child mutant that he's trying to protect this mutant. It was Leech, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's trying to protect Leech from the blast, and he realizes like this is folly, and basically like Leech dies. It's incredible storytelling.
And then yeah, like you said that Mr. Sinister is like this like villain, like he's like the the villain, but he's not like the main villain. Like he's one of like he's like just under Bastion, and Bastion just creates these android sentinels that like it's people instead of like the regular sentinels.
Yeah, so basically he uses the DNA of so Dr. Sinister takes DNA and creates clones. But Bastion is actually like implanting people with this virus that kind of creates them into portable sentinels wherever he wants them. And he's kind of populated the entire planet with them to go after mutants as a whole.
Right. And yeah, like that last fight was crazy because, you know, they're fighting Bastion, but then they're also the X-Men are fighting. There's a team that's fighting Bastion. Then there's also a team that's like fighting Magneto up at Asteroid M. But like before Magneto goes up, he recruits Rogue and Sunspot because they're kind of done with like, you know, like all this stuff is happening. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And you know, and then in this time, Professor Xavier comes back. I'm like, dude, this man was just off in space somewhere. I was like, why did he leave these people like this?
This guy was about to get married to like an alien princess. Like,
yeah, seriously.
Go back. What are you doing?
And he reveals the reason why he picked Magneto was because he wanted Scott and Jean Grey to be able to like break away, to like live their lives. And you know, I mean, but at the end of the day, like, you know, what Scott said was right, was that like, I mean, he could have tried, but he would have always ended up back there, just like Professor Xavier all ended up back there too. Yeah. So
one thing I want to talk about is Magneto shows why he is an Omega level threat.
Oh, dude.
So he basically breaks free someone breaks him free from his imprisonment from Bastion and Dr. Sinister, and he goes to one of the poles and uses the magnetic poles basically to create an EMP that surrounds the entire world and turns everything off, basically, including all the Sentinels. You know that.
Yeah. And that was actually a really cool moment because, like, you know, we caught a glimpse of Spider-Man.
Yeah, we caught a glimpse, like, over the course of everything, like, we caught a glimpse of a couple people.
Of a lot of people. Was it Silver Samurai was one? Like, we saw some, like, heroes. We saw some villains.
Daredevil, Doctor Doom.
Dude, when I saw Daredevil, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was like, what's up with this? There was also, you saw Cloak and Dagger, Doctor Strange, and then like there was various. You had Captain America, like he actually had like an active, like not active, but he had a moment with Rogue when Rogue was going on like a warpath.
Rogue threw his shield into a nearby mountain.
Yeah, you saw Iron Man, and then Morph changed into a couple things. Morph changed into the Hulk, Psylocke for a moment, like just like it
Juggernaut,
was really, really cool.
Quicksilver.
Juggernaut. Yeah.
So
yeah,
what I think of that they used, like Morph was a storytelling device where they were allowed basically to use him whichever way they felt was necessary for the plot, but also allowed them to, you know, call back to other mutants and other characters in the Marvel Universe, which I think was a fantastic choice because, like, Rogue can take the abilities from other people, but Morph can literally morph into them and mimic their abilities. So it kind of like from like a visual standpoint, it's way cooler to use Morph because he can do whatever he wants, and they can use these little clips of, say, Psylocke or Juggernaut fighting, which is sick.
Yeah. That was like one of the things that I wanted to like make sure that we pointed out was like, dude, just so many cameos, man.
They use Morph fantastically. You know, like in the end when Magneto, like Wolverine is attacking Magneto, and Magneto takes all of the adamantium out of Wolverine's body.
Dude, and it's like, I know that that's something that happens in the comics, and the fact that they did that in this, I was like, oof.
Yeah, no, they weren't holding back. They were like giving us the best possible season that they could. So,
dude, I was just like, I said, "Oh no, they did not." Like,
Yeah, it
I would
feels
consider that
uncomfortable.
also an omega level like thing
Yeah,
to do. Just
yeah.
rip out the adamantium of somebody's bones.
One thing I really liked that they did with Morph is they allowed him to play the character of Jean Grey, which in the other movies it would have been given to Mystique. You know, like Mystique was able
Mm.
to mimic Jean Grey in the movies. Morph kind of did what Jean Grey couldn't do in this show, which was tell him that she loved him. Which is
Yeah,
what he needed to hear. It's a long running thing where like Jean Grey clearly loves Wolverine as well, and Wolverine clearly loves Jean Grey, but they can never tell each other. So I love that like he was totally unconscious, and Morph was able to be like, Jean Grey won't tell you this, but I guess I can, and I thought that
yeah,
was really powerful.
yeah. That was, yeah, man. Like from start to end, this show, this season, really like just like rocked you with every episode, man.
Yeah. So, without getting too bogged up in the 3 episode finale, the show does leave you off on a cliffhanger. We have some of the
Yeah,
team in the future and some of the team in the past. So, some of the team that's in the future get to see a random tribe of mutants, and one of the mutants that they meet is a young Cable, or like their son before he becomes Cable, basically. And the other team that goes into the past, which includes Magneto and Charles Xavier, they get to meet Ensaba Nur, which is Apocalypse, before he becomes Apocalypse. And I can't wait to see how they, like incorporate this in future seasons, because if they continue the storytelling prowess that they did within the first season of the show, the second season is going to be just phenomenal.
dude, you get an Apocalypse season.
Dude,
Is
we've
it
already
gonna make up for X-Men Apocalypse that we gotten?
we've already gotten Apocalypse in the animated series, but it wasn't very good. It was just kind of campy. It's kind of corny. But like seeing like an origin story of Apocalypse through this kind of lens, chef's kiss.
Yeah, it
Come
was
on.
cool.
Let's do
Yeah,
it.
it was
Let's do
cool.
it. Anthony, final thoughts on X-Men 97.
It is worth the watch. It is worth the attention. If you can draw your attention away from TikTok and Instagram and social media and Amazon shopping and whatnot, it's definitely worth it. It's an amazing season. It'll keep you gripped from start to finish, especially if you love X-Men. Like it's amazing. It gives you, if you love the original show, you'll love this one even more.
No more Flappy Bird for you. Watch X-Men 97. Guys, thank you so much for watching us here, or watching us. Well, thank you so much for listening to us here for our 94th episode of Project Geekology, covering X-Men 97. This was basically our end credits scene to our 14 episode podcast about the Fox X-Men movies, and we're very excited to kind of be done with it. I think like we've talked about X-Men a lot the past couple months.
We have.
And I think it's time to move on to bigger and brighter horizons. Maybe not as bright, maybe a little bit dingier horizons, sandier horizons. Like we're gonna get into the nitty gritty of like the galaxy far, far away, and try to get into some trouble with the Hutts or the Pikes, more likely.
Right.
Yeah, everyone is like in bad favor with the Pikes. I don't know why.
The Pikes just hate everyone.
Yeah, Pikes are just very hard to get along with. Guys, thank you. We will see you next week. We're talking Star Wars Outlaws for our 95th episode. If you want to give us a rating here or review or whatever, be sure to give us a 5-star juicy rating, as Anthony always says.
It has to be.
It has to be juicy. It has to be 5-star. They are not mutually exclusive. Like they have to. It can't be a juicy review if it's not 5-star. It can't be a 5-star review if it's not juicy. So come on,
unless either or doesn't have, like, unless you can comment on it but you can't give stars, or if you can't comment on it but you can give stars, either or.
Something like that. Yeah.
But if they have both, even better.
Even better. the more stars, the more merrier, the more juicy. Guys, if you want to check out any of our visit our social. Why can't I speak? If you want to visit our socials, you can check out all of that in the show notes down below. You'll find links to our TikTok. We don't have TikTok. You'll find links to our Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, all that in the show notes down below. Be sure to check that out. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Goodbye, y'all.
The Wolverine is adamantiumless currently. It's the last time I can do it, really. All right. Bye, guys.